In this podcast episode, Dandapani, a Hindu priest and former celibate monk with over a decade of monastic experience, shares profound insights into the pervasive issue of distraction in modern life and its deep costs. Through reflections on focus, awareness, mortality, and spiritual practice, he explores how mastering attention can transform one's life, relationships, and spiritual journey. The conversation also dives into the mechanics of the mind, the importance of philosophy on the spiritual path, and practical strategies to cultivate unwavering concentration amid today's digital distractions. Dandapani begins by emphasizing that life is not short, but finite, with an unknown endpoint that calls for conscious use of our time. The tragic reality of distraction means many live physically present but mentally absent, whether with phones or drifting thoughts, resulting in a growing sense of unfulfillment. People often work intensely to create meaningful experiences, travel, family time, concerts, but fail to fully inhabit those moments, compounding dissatisfaction. This mental fragmentation not only wastes the irreplaceable energy each of us has, but erodes the quality of relationships. The core issue is that distraction hijacks attention, fracturing experience and diminishing life's value. Central to the discussion is clarifying the relationship between focus, concentration, and presence. Dandapani points out that focus and concentration are essentially synonymous. Both describe the ability to keep one's ball of light, awareness, on a single object without wavering. Presence is not a practice in itself, but the outcome of sustained focus. Being physically in a moment but having wandering attention means one is not truly present. The common advice to be present misses the practical mechanism undergirding it. One must practice focusing attention. This subtle but critical distinction reframes presence as something achieved through deliberate mental training, not a passive state to be sought independently. Dandapani introduces a foundational model of mind and awareness. The mind is described as a vast, immobile space filled with different emotional and intellectual areas: anger, happiness, memories. And awareness is like a glowing ball of light that moves within this space. Wherever awareness travels, that area of the mind lights up, generating conscious experience. For example, if awareness moves to anger, one experiences anger. If it moves to happiness, one experiences happiness. This distinction means awareness, not the mind itself, is what moves to shape experience. Mastery thus comes down to cultivating control over where awareness goes, which ultimately determines what thoughts and emotions manifest. Further refining his mental framework, Dandapani describes the mind as a three-story building. The ground floor is the conscious mind dealing with sensory input and external reality. The second floor is the subconscious, housing intellectual processing and unresolved memories. The third floor is the superconscious, the seat of intuition and deep spiritual insight. Awareness can only be in one floor at a time, and spiritual progress means refining awareness through these levels, ultimately accessing the superconscious self. The superconscious carries an undeniable experiential depth that motivates and transforms, reducing susceptibility to worldly distractions. Those who have experienced it desire more of that inner state and thus live with greater focus and less distraction. Reflecting on mortality, Dandapani links the finite nature of life to urgency in cultivating focus and purpose. Awareness of death motivates conscious time management and priority setting, as every moment given must be honored. Quoting his guru, he explains how internalizing the inevitability of an ending reshapes how one values attention, relationships, and experiences. Presence becomes a sacred gift, as the minutes shared with another person will never return. This lens counters the cultural tendency to waste attention on trivialities or digital distraction, urging listeners to treat focus as an essential, non-negotiable offering, both to oneself and others. Dandapani invokes the law of practice to illustrate why distraction is so dominant. People have been practicing it intensively for years, often 8 or more hours daily, 7 days a week. Like any skill, mastery requires practice, so most have unintentionally become masters at being distracted. Conversely, focus is a skill rarely cultivated, which explains why it feels difficult. He compares this to training for professional sports, noting that while one wouldn't expect to make the Lakers after only 6 months of practice, consistent training improves ability. The same applies to mental focus. It requires daily application embedded in routine activities for gradual but lasting improvement. The podcast explores the link between distraction-induced anxiety and the movement of awareness. When awareness jumps between multiple unresolved tasks or worries, the mind builds tension and stress. For example, juggling projects A, B, C, and D in fragmented bursts creates mental chaos, which manifests as anxiety. Focused attention, by contrast, stabilizes awareness and replaces anxiety with presence. Through a simple exercise, intentionally shifting awareness rapidly among many tasks, listeners can personally experience how this scattered attention feeds distress. Understanding awareness mechanics thus unlocks practical methods to reduce anxiety by cultivating steadiness. Training focus demands willpower, described as the mental muscle that grips and redirects the ball of light. Developing this faculty begins with small practices such as finishing what one starts and doing slightly more or better than expected, like making the bed thoroughly each morning or washing dishes completely. By embedding focus practice into daily, unavoidable activities, talking with children, brushing teeth, eating meals, one accumulates hours of sustained concentration with no added burden. This approach makes focus accessible and attainable for even the busiest people. The key challenge is sustaining awareness and gently bringing it back each time it drifts, acknowledging that the mind's dog must be retrained patiently over time. A significant part of distraction stems from unfiltered intake of external stimuli, particularly from digital sources. Dandapani likens the mind to a kitchen drain that must be protected with strainers to prevent clogging, yet most fail to erect boundaries around what information they consume. Constant podcasts, social media, news, and notifications jam the mind's library with unindexed chaotic data, blocking intuition and deeper insight from the superconscious. To restore clarity, individuals must actively filter inputs, reduce unnecessary media consumption, and guard their mental environment as carefully as one protects physical spaces. Dandapani stresses the indispensable role of a clear philosophical framework to define spiritual goals and practices. Whether one aligns with Abrahamic traditions, focusing on a singular God and afterlife, or Eastern philosophies emphasizing reincarnation and divinity within, this choice colors all subsequent steps. Without a consistent philosophy, spiritual seekers risk wandering among shallow buffet spirituality, sampling many paths without depth or direction. Commitment to a coherent worldview anchors practice and clarifies the ultimate aim, whether it be self-realization, enlightenment, or union with the divine. Drawing parallels to athletes or artists who refine one skill through committed practice, Dandapani elaborates on how reaching into the superconscious requires perseverance and discipline. Tasting this deeper state shifts the soul's orientation away from fleeting distractions toward lasting inner peace. Markers of spiritual maturity include increased observation, humility, compassion, and selective engagement with people and activities to preserve energy for inner work. While psychic abilities and spiritual powers exist, he warns they can be distractions or ego traps and are no substitute for the steady cultivation of presence and self-knowledge. When asked about the nature of consciousness and mind, Dandapani replies with the simple but profound notion of neti, neti. Not this, not that, signaling that seeking definitive conceptual answers leads to an endless rabbit hole. Instead, the focus should remain on direct experience of the self as pure awareness beyond thought and identification. Philosophical speculation is acknowledged as a potential distraction, while persistent practice points to undeniable inner realities accessible within one's own mind and being. While monastic life offers ideal conditions to cultivate focus, Dandapani describes how daily monastery practice involved integrating awareness training into routine tasks like working in finance, gardening, or milking cows, each becoming an opportunity to hold attention. Formal group meditation lasted only an hour a day, but the cumulative daily environment reinforced steady concentration. This model translates to modern life through consistent mindfulness in ordinary moments. True progress comes from years of repeated simple practice, not from occasional grand sessions. Addressing how to balance worldly ambitions with inner peace, Dandapani advocates simplification and proportional energy management. Recognizing that both time and daily energy reserves are finite, One must allocate resources deliberately, investing enough to grow ambitions while preserving space for self-care and equanimity. Everything outside these priorities requires renunciation. This mindful reduction of distractions and commitments ensures sustained focus on what truly matters and supports well-being. The episode concludes with sobering guidance on navigating spiritual teachers and communities. Dandapani emphasizes the importance of discernment, advising avoidance of charismatic leaders who hype themselves excessively and whose followers merely praise the guru without personal introspection or genuine inquiry. Authenticity reveals itself through humility, questioning, and depth among a teacher's inner circle. Given numerous reports of abuse and manipulation in spiritual contexts, extra caution is urged, especially toward large followings and narcissistic figures. True teaching focuses on the self and sustained personal work rather than flashy powers or ego validation. Ultimately, the most vital teaching Dandapani offers is the necessity of ongoing, even monotonous, repetitive self-work to raise consciousness. While experiences of higher states, intuition, or expanded awareness exist, they are the fruit of consistent practice and grounded discipline rather than shortcuts or flashy exploits. The primary lever he names for transformative impact, both personally and collectively, is the upliftment of one's own mind through daily effort, leading to better decisions, relationships, and contributions to the world.